I want to tell you a little bit about the event that's coming up in December that a lot of people are interested in. But before I do, I want to introduce you to the temple bell that I have right here. This is in all Zen monasteries and Zendos, there is a large temple bell like this one over here. And it's you're only seeing a little bit of it, but it's quite a large bell. And when I was at the Zen monasteries, Thich Nhat Hanh Zen monasteries, we would often do our meditation with this bell that was part of it. Was always in the Dharma hall, and I love the sound of it. You'll hear it. It's a wonderful, deep, resonant sound, and I felt like, I wish I had one of those in my own Zendo at home. And they cost at that time around $600 to $800. They're really big, brass, beautiful bells. And I thought, well, I guess I'll never have one of those bells. It's just too expensive. And when I moved to Sedona, there was a guy who was giving Dharma talks for many years, and he had a large temple bell, and he was affiliated with a monastery. And he retired from doing that, and he decided to sell the bell that he'd had for about 20 years. So they last forever. I mean, they're handed down generation after generation. And for $50. So now I have a temple bell that I really wanted, and I'm happy to share this with you. It's a beautiful sound. And why we use the temple bells is they take a long time to ring out, for the sound to fade. And as you're listening to the sound and it becomes quieter and quieter and quieter as it keeps fading, it ends in silence. So your attention is drawn to the bell, and it's drawn to its fading, its whole sound, and it's fading. And as it gets to that point just in between where there's a little bit of sound and no sound, as it gets to that point that moves to no sound, you're brought into silence, into the inner silence that's always in you, that most of us aren't aware of. Most of us are not aware of this inner silence. This is very important for meditation, very important for spiritual practice, to find that inner silence and stillness that's always within you. But your thoughts, the sounds of the world, the distractions of the world make it so that we don't hear it, we don't experience it. And we go to a Zen monastery in order to do that, in order to hear this deep inner sound, which is our authentic self. It's our true nature, to hear this stillness and silence, where the mind is not interfering, where the world is not interfering, where the distractions are not interfering. It's just this beautiful, still sound. So I invite you to hear this before I tell you about this event that's coming up. Enjoy. Lovely, isn't it? But there's nothing more beautiful than the silence that it leads us into. If you tasted that, if you could feel and experience that silence that the bell leads us into, it's such a precious thing in this world. This is leading us into our authentic, true nature. And that's really what this event in December is about. It's going to be from noon to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And I'll give you the exact date. I think right now it's going to be December 10th, but it's possible that may change. But the structure is going to be the same. Now, the structure of this, I call it a deep listening event, because what I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh in 40 years of being with him and part of the Order of Interbeing is the importance of deep listening. And deep listening, it's a practice. It's not something that we usually do. And so when we do Dharma sharing in the Sangha, it's not conversation. We're not like conversing back and forth with people. We call that crosstalk. There's no crosstalk. One person expresses from the deepest place within them, and I'll talk about that a little bit later after the deep listening. And the rest of the Sangha gives their full attention to that. Full attention means we're not thinking or commenting in our mind about what they're saying. We're just fully present for them. We're fully, deeply present for them. So deep listening is also listening to silence. How do we hear this silence? Deep listening. We listen with every molecule of our body, every element of our being, every aspect of our being is listening fully. This is how we hear the silence. We're completely present for it, completely present, completely now. And this is deep listening. So we practice this with everyone who's speaking, deep listening. So we're listening from this place of silence and stillness. It's a wonderful thing. And if you haven't done this before, it may sound difficult, maybe impossible. Your mind is here and there and you don't know this silence. But being in the presence of other people doing it, you sort of naturally fall into it. This is why we go to retreats. This is why we go to a Zen monastery or an ashram, to be with people who are focused and concentrated in this way. And it affects us because we're not really as separate as we think we are. In fact, we're not separate at all. And we experience this lack of separation in this. The deep silence and peace and stillness that is here affects us, and our mind slows down and we become more present and we become part of this whole, which we've always been, but we feel it in this group. And that's a big part of this deep listening practice. It's where the bell leads us to, this silence and stillness. And in this, we're fully present, fully aware for everything that's said. And that's a wonderful thing to do. So that's one part of it. One part of it is this deep listening. And the other part of it is sharing from this deep place. Now, I said before that people can ask questions of me, and I'll answer the questions, also coming from this place of deep silence. The silence itself will speak and will answer the questions, and however it does. It doesn't have anything to do with me as a person. It will just come up and answer in this way, and we learn from this. But you don't have to ask a question. You can make a statement. And if you make a statement, well, I won't answer. I'll just stay in the silence with everyone else and be present in this silence with everyone else, giving you this full, absolute attention. And this is a rare experience in this world for people, even one person, to give you their full and absolute attention without thinking about themselves, without thinking about what they would say and how they would respond, or if they've had similar experiences or anything, just fully attention on you. And yes, that can be a little intimidating. It can be a little intimidating. So the people who when I said that I was going to do this, that all the people that responded, almost none of them said that they wanted to speak or ask a question. They all were like, I'll be a listener, which is wonderful. But it's good if somebody speaks too. If somebody makes a statement from this deep place. And I'll tell you, in the 40 years that I was with the Sangha, and I still am really, but in those 40 years where I was just beginning with it, when we would do the Dharma sharing and do this thing, something in my heart wanted to speak. Something in my heart wanted to say a very strong inner thing that I had never heard before. It was so deeply personal and authentic to me that wasn't even aware of it myself. So I'd never said it to anybody else. And so it's intimidating to have that feeling, to suddenly share something that's so incredibly deeply personal to you, intimate to you. You're afraid that people won't like it or they'll be critical of you. You don't know because you've never shared it before. You haven't even shared it with yourself. It just comes up, but your heart wants to speak it. And at the same time, you're terrified too because it's so deeply intimate. And then you do it anyways because other people have done it, the Sangha, and this is the most safe place that you could ever do something like this. There's many places where you wouldn't, but in this place, there's no place safer than this. No place safer than this. This is a place of love, of complete and absolute acceptance, of oneness, the most accepting there can be. So from that, you share. And you find that when you share this deeply, intimately personal, unique thing to you, that it affects everyone. It touches everyone. Everyone resonates with it because we're not separate. I was talking to this with a friend of mine who's a songwriter, and he said songwriters have a saying that the most personal is the most universal. The most personal is the most universal. When you speak from your heart something deeply personal, intimate to you, it strikes a chord in everyone because we're not separate. When we speak in superficial terms and just a level of our identity and personality and what's on the surface, far away from our true, authentic being, it's not universal. It's quite unique, and it doesn't touch people in the same way at all. When people bare their soul, open their heart, it touches everyone. You know that from, seeing theater plays, songwriters. The most personal is the most universal. So it's wonderful to share that. And over time, you realize that people don't, criticize you or do anything like that you were afraid of, to speak something that's so authentic to you. And you do it more and more often. Every time you do it in the Sangha, in a setting like this, you're met with this wonderful response of love, of oneness, of universality. And you realize that you are part of something. You are this something that's much greater than you are. That's your authentic self is like that. And so over time, it took me years, but over time, you have the courage to share from this authentic part of you all the time. You become your authentic self. So this is a practice, like a training, that gets you to see and have the courage to do that. So I invite you to do that. You don't have to bring a question beforehand that you're thinking about. Before the very moment that you're in this setting and your heart starts speaking to you. You don't have to bring it ahead of time. It will arise in you, and it will, and it does. For everyone. If there are enough people, not everyone is going to have a chance on this event, to be able to speak. But some will. And what you'll find is the people who are speaking, if they have a question, it's your question. You're just about to ask that question and somebody else did it before you. If someone is making a deep statement of something that they're experiencing, then that's also your experience you find. So you don't actually have to voice this because someone else will. How do they know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your questions are? We're not as separate as we think. And this experience shows you that directly, the direct experience that we're not. So the way we do it in the Sangha, in groups, when we're not on Zoom, is that when someone wants to speak, they bow. And then the Sangha, all the other people acknowledge that and they bow back to them and then they can speak. And when they're done, they bow again and the Sangha bows back, and that's the end of their speaking, questioning, or whatever they want to do. Now, usually you don't ask a question, but in this case, I'm the teacher of this. I'm being the teacher, the facilitator, and the teacher of this. So you can ask a question of me. This is often Dharma talks are done with the answer to people's questions. And that creates a Dharma talk, a beautiful Dharma talk, because it's coming from the universal question that everybody wants to ask. And it's answered from this same place, from this place of silence and stillness. So that becomes a wonderful teaching in itself. But if you don't have a question and you have a statement, something that you want to say, we'll allow the space for that. And when you're done, we allow time, a space of silence after everyone speaks. We don't rush in with another person. We wait. There's space there for that, whatever is said, to sort of resonate and be in that space that everybody can feel. It's a very powerful thing to do, and I'm really happy to offer this. And there'll be a lot of time in silence too. So you'll see, if you don't want to speak, you're too intimidated to do it, that's fine. That's fine. But if your heart feels like doing it and you're still intimidated and afraid, that just means it's authentic. That's a good thing. That means that this is something you really should share. This is something you really should bring into the group, because it is coming from something that's deeply true in you. And in my experience, there's always some fear about doing it because it's so true and deeply authentic, and we're not used to expressing that in the world. So I would invite you to try to see what happens if you do that. And don't worry that you feel intimidated or scared about that, because that's a sign that the truth of you is coming forward. And you need to know that. And you need to know that this is good. And you need to know that this is, in this group, will be treasured and honored. And we'll be grateful for it because we're all learning from it. So the wonderful thing about this is it's not just me teaching. All of us are teaching. Listening, the listening and the presence that we bring, that's teaching. The sharing of this deeply intimate thing that's arising in our heart, that's so deep and personal, that's teaching. You don't realize it, but you're teaching all of us when you do that. You're bringing truth into the world. So it's an opportunity for that. And I think these two things, the deep listening and the deep sharing, are the two most important things of this event. My teaching in this is fine too. This is okay. Something beautiful will come from this as well. And this is what you're used to in my satsangs and the silent transmissions. But to see that everyone is teaching. And we do this in a beautiful way because it's very unlike a conversation. It's almost the opposite of a conversation. When someone's speaking, all attention is completely on that. And no one can respond to them. So responding to them, if the next person wants to speak, we don't have to bow. And on Zoom, there's a little hand raising thing, and you can just click the hand raising thing. I'll show you how to do that. And your hand will go up, and then we'll see who wants to speak, and then I'll pick them. And we also will sound the bell before the person speaks, after they bow, when they're done, and then have the silence, and then it'll be time for the next person to go through. So there's a lot of space for people to speak and be with their deep feelings and deep listening. Because when we're deep listening and we're deeply present, we're also listening to silence. We're listening to the bell. We're listening to the sound in between when people aren't speaking. We're listening to all of it. And when we listen, we're not just listening to the person's words. We're listening to their being. We're listening to everything. This is how we listen to the silence, with our whole being. We listen to all of it. And we give that same attention to the person who's speaking. So I'm very happy to offer this to you. It's a wonderful, and you'll get to hear the bell again. I think from now on, I'll use the bell in all the beginnings of all the silent transmissions. It's just a really nice thing to bring in. You know, when you're in the Indian traditions, often we'll have kirtan or chanting or om or things like that in the beginning and end. And the bell sort of does that same thing, just with its sound. It brings us into this place of peace and stillness and silence and love. Love is no separation, the realization that separation is an illusion. We are all this one. Thank you, my friend. I will give another sound of the bell. What we were taught to invite the bell, to learn how to do the bell, is to be in this place of presence and stillness and silence. And invite the bell. We don't hit the bell, we don't strike the bell. We invite it to sound. The bell is already here, but we invite it to sound, and we invite it to lead us into this deep silence and stillness of our true nature. Thank you, my friend. I hope you'll come to this event and enjoy this and be a deep listener and a deep share if you're willing. And again, you can ask questions. That's part of it too, is to ask questions, and that the answer comes from this same deep place in me that is already in you. But if you're not aware of it, you have a question. If you are, you don't have any questions. But as I said, something arises in you, something very deep, whether the question is very, very deep to you. If it is, if you feel it's very personal and intimate to only you, everyone else also has that same question. So you're asking the question for everyone. And when I answer the question, it comes from the same knowing that's in you. And you'll realize that you know that already. There is no separation. Thank you, my friend. I'll send more information on the email list. And if you're not on the email list, you just go to my website. It's Enlightenment News. You'll see that. Sign up for that. And I'll send information there. It'll also be on Facebook, on my Facebook page. Thank you, my friend. I look forward to seeing you.